Okay, so we're now going to look at the next section that we were exploring in our Summer Challenge programme. And it's really looking at the idea of building your skills. And we built the programme around two sets of skills. One of the skill sets is around practical skills, and we're looking really around culinary skills. So what exactly are you going to be doing in that section, Anne?
I'm going to look at breakfast and I'm going to look at lunch, and then we're going to combine the two of those in creating a picnic.
Okay. And I suppose what's really important in that section is to make sure that you're building the conversation into what kinds of breakfasts and lunches before you go back to school. What would really do you right throughout the day in school, help you learn, help you engage in class, and making sure that as you plan maybe your menu for the week, you're looking at the kinds of things that you can use while you're in school, but also things that the young person can make themselves. Now remember, with a lot of food, there can be real sensory issues with food, isn't that right, Hannah?
Yeah, very much. So you need to very much consult the child or young person when you're doing the cookery activities and adapt whatever it is we're doing to suit the child or young person that you're working with very much.
And also building their sensory capacity around food as well. So textures can be a real issue, smells can be a real issue. So again, making sure that when you're practicing these, and Anna's going to go through that in that section, so for example, maybe preparing fruit. There can be real textural issues in preparing fruit, so maybe using gloves to dull the sensitivity around that textural experience, so that they can again build their capacity to maybe eat that food, to maybe prepare that vegetable, etc. So that's what we'll be looking at the food, but we're also wanting to build the young person's capacity to navigate some anxiety and some maybe worry as they re-engage with school. And we're going to start off by doing a really simple activity, and it's looking at 3-2-1 strategies. And really what we're using this is as a way to allow you as a facilitator to explore with the young person different ways for them to navigate how they experience certain situations. And it's really important in an autistic context that when you think about social imagination, and for many young people, the ability to consider a situation. So for example, I go into a classroom and where I normally sit is not available for me. What do I do? That can be really anxiety causing for a lot of young people. I would have always sat in the front seat beside the door, and now suddenly there's a press there and my seat's no longer there. What do I do? Now, exploring that situation, discussing how the young person might feel, maybe coming up with some scripts and ways to navigate that situation is absolutely appropriate. But assuming then that the learning they've experienced in that context will apply if that happens in a science classroom or in a home economics classroom, it doesn't always transfer. So you have to, in the context of autism, stretch that further. Imagine if that happened in a different situation, and a different situation, and a different situation. Is that as important in the primary sector as it would be for us in the secondary sector?
Very much so, yeah. I mean, social imagination across the board is one of the areas that's affected when a person is autistic. So those predicting skills, using that language of probably, that flexible thought pattern can be really affected. So, having those discussions, and as you said, kind of looking at how that would play out in different situations, because that transference of learning from what's applicable in one situation is or isn't applicable in another, can be very challenging for a young person on the spectrum. So it's really good preparation for going back to school to look at that in all kinds of different contexts. And I think lots of the activities that we're doing in this programme are that can be explored through them.
Yeah. And I think in the second level sector, like even if you take break times, how a young person will experience before school starts, small break and lunch break are very different. Because maybe I'm not going to eat at small break, but I am going to eat at lunch break. And where do I eat? And if it's raining, what happens? And if I'm in big yard or small yard, or if I want to be inside. So again, it's considering all of those situations and not assuming that one learned experience for an autistic young person will transfer to another situation. You need to actively and explicitly do that work. That's really, really important. So use this strategy as an opportunity to say, but what about? What about if you were in English class for that? What about if you were in maths class for that? What about if you were upstairs? and it's trying it out in different situations so the young person can explore that in a more developed way and see the connection and build that transferable skill in a number of different situations.
And for autistic young people, you know, the way in which many will learn that skill is through practice over and over and over again, and having that experience of how many different situations this particular rule or this particular way of doing something applies to, and what situations it doesn't.
Yeah. And that's where it can be really useful in developing scripts, developing a series of sentences that I use, that when I find myself in that situation, this is what I say to make sure I find myself in a safer place. And in this activity, developing scripts can be extraordinarily powerful. And then maybe even going back to our previous activity around the motivational posters, actually creating maybe an image or a poster around that script, because again it can build your capacity, and an awful lot of autistic young people think visually, not just narratively. So as a result of that, creating that visual message, connecting to that emotional message, or that anxiety-inducing message, I think is really, really important. So we've two kind of activities in the worksheet. One of them is an A to Z. Now an A to Z is a really nice way of stimulating thought. Think about it like a focused brainstorm. Like I could say to Hannah or to Anne, just, well, think of anything about feeling relaxed. When you think about being relaxed, what kinds of things come to your mind? Now, one really useful way when you're doing an activity like this with young people is not to ask them, but to ask them to think about another person. The one step removed. In behaviour management, we call it the psychodynamic approach. So imagine another person was going into school, and imagine for other people, think about everybody you know. Think about adults in your life, think about young, if you're maybe in the second level sector, think about children in primary school. What kinds of things help them relax? Now, you can do it as a really simple brainstorm, putting ideas up on the board. I like to use the A to Z as a really simple way, so you could write the letters, all the letters of the alphabet up on the board, and they're trying to come up with one thing connected to each letter of the alphabet. So for example, if you were thinking about the letter A, what kinds of things might you think about being relaxed?
I would think about asking questions. I know that when I feel like I can ask questions, that means I feel very relaxed and I'm comfortable.
Yeah, I might think about something like attitude, your attitude to that situation, how you approach or how you're coming in. So maybe if I'm going into a subject in second level that I find more challenging, so let's say for me it might be languages, my attitude might have meant that I was more aware of what was going on around me, and I was more likely to be hyperstimulated by the environment that I was in. So thinking about your attitude. Is there any others, Anne?
Maybe just like being aware, like you said, that actually can make you feel relaxed or calm in the situation.
So again, what you're really doing there is going through each of the letters of the alphabet to generate and signpost a discussion. And it's around creating a load of ideas on the table. Now, I would avoid, you might decide to do it as a reflective exercise, fill in as many as you can on the page and then discuss them. You might decide to put it up on the board, as I said, you might decide to use post-it notes. But what you want to do is create that groundwork to get them thinking about what does relaxed look like. When somebody is calm, what do I see? What do I see in their face, in their body? How is their tone of voice? And again, you're building up that recognition, the recognition of those non-verbal cues, which are a huge part of the communication about that sense of being relaxed. It isn't just what I say. Very often people will say, yeah, I'm very calm, or they'll say, I am very calm. And you know by the tone of voice that they're not necessarily feeling very calm. I am not feeling very calm right now because there's a poster falling off the wall beside us as we speak right now, and it's distracting us all quite a lot. So that's a really good example of when you're in a situation and you're doing something and now the poster's off the wall. So our sense of calm is being kind of brought back again. But that, you know, and actually as part of this activity, building in little moments where things go wrong, or seeing those little moments where things go wrong as opportunities to go, what was that like? When you were doing that there now, how did you feel? Well, in another situation, how might you kind of handle that as well? So that idea of what does relaxed look like, what does it feel like, You can extend that activity to ask them to maybe find images online that demonstrate what relaxed looks like. You can ask them to maybe draw pictures of what relaxed looks like. So again, it's that sense of what calm and relaxed, and creating as many, and then bring it back to them. But how would I know you were feeling calm? If I was to maybe be in a class with you, what messages would you give me that tell me you're feeling calm? Or what you might do is do a scale and create a series of situations. So you're going to the cinema and by yourself for the first time on a calm scale, 1 to 10. 10 being feeling really, really calm, 1 being not calm at all. Where would you be on that? And again, what means that you're a 3 or 4? What would it look like if you were 1 point up on the scale? So you're really exploring that a little bit further. And then you go into the 3-2-1 strategy. So in the worksheet, basically, it's a really, really simple concept that you think about 3 strategies that help people feel relaxed. And so I'm going to ask Hannah and Anne to do now is on individual pieces of paper or post-it notes, they're going to just write down different strategies that people might use to help them feel calm and relaxed. A different one on each page, if you don't mind. So now you might be thinking of, different ways that other people, and like for example, some of the things that some people will do to help them relax, like going for a run, to me that would not be relaxing. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't like to do it, but it's certainly not relaxing. But for another person, that could be really, really relaxing. So, always think about others. I wonder what your little brother or sister might do. What do they like to do? Well, maybe they like to play a video game, or they like to watch their favourite television programme. I have a lot of dogs. I like to go for a walk with the dogs, or even just sit down and let the dogs run around. I find just even petting the dog really, really calming. And again, it's about what works for you and for your own system to help you relax and calm. And as adults, we need to be really, really aware. Because certainly working in a programme like this, where you're coming up with loads of different ideas for young people on a summer challenge, you can really be aware of, okay, I'm a bit nervous around that area, or I'm very comfortable talking about this area, and being aware yourself, your own reflective skills. So what I'm going to do now is maybe put some of these up, and we're going to explore these a little bit more. So these are some of Anne's ideas. Playing with Lego, maybe out playing with friends, drawing, exercise, yoga, meeting friends, music. That might be cheating, and it's very similar to playing with friends, isn't it? So, breathing exercises, reading, doing an activity that you enjoy, having a pleasant sensory experience, so maybe like a hot shower, eating, smelling something that you like to smell. Now, they're absolutely all really good examples of things that will help somebody relax. Can you notice any of those that might cause anxiety for some people that will actually be doing the exact opposite? Which ones of those do you think could be anxiety causing for some people?
Reading, if somebody doesn't like reading.
Yeah.
Really?
Or being forced to read something they didn't like.
Yeah.
Friends.
Maybe, sorry. So maybe going out with friends, or meeting friends, especially, a bit like what Hannah was saying earlier on, if it's an unplanned activity. I don't know what we're going to do, I don't know how long we're going to do it for, I don't know what the rules of the game are. All of those things are things that can then cause huge anxiety, especially for an autistic person, if they haven't got a plan or a structure in place for what they're going to do.
The sensory experience, maybe.
Yeah, well, again, the wrong type of sensory experience. So for example, music, listening to loud music can be a real challenge, because if you don't like music too loud, or if you're listening to music that you don't like, or a type of music you don't like. So for example, if you're working in a group and allowing everyone to pick a different piece of music that you listen to, that can be a real challenge, because I'm being made to listen to music that actually overwhelms me or makes me feel very challenged. Smells can be a very important one as well. Really being aware of the impact of certain smells have, because it can really flood your sense of your sensory experience, and you find it very, very difficult to concentrate. So what you're doing there is you want to really spend time exploring loads of different strategies. Understanding, really exploring the fact that they won't all work for everybody, and that some things will work for you that just will not work. Like, for example, the example I gave was maybe, going out with my dogs and my dogs run or playing ball with the dogs. For somebody who doesn't like animals, that would be absolutely awful. And they would get no sense of calm or relaxation from that at all. So understanding that what works for one person will not work for everybody, and it doesn't have to. The goal of this exercise is that you find 2 things that will work for that young person. And that you try those and you practice those, and ideally there are 2 things that they might be able to use in school. Or they might be able to share with their teachers, so the teachers know that they need to use them. And for a lot of autistic people, being able to stim comfortably can be really soothing and help them get a sense of calm. And understanding that maybe encouraging the young person to explore that a little bit more, encouraging them to communicate that with school and with their teachers, so that there is a safe way and an appropriate way for them to be able to stim in an environment that they feel comfortable in. And being able to do that, being able to flag that with a teacher, whether it's in the classroom, whether they want to go and stim in the corridor or privately, that's fine, but making sure that they understand that that's absolutely appropriate as a way of self-regulating and helping to navigate that. And the idea being that you practice those actions then. So this is a really interesting thing to do at the beginning of the week, and then as you go through the week, you're encouraging them, when they're a little bit more challenged, practice your strategy. Practice the strategy. How is that working? And then you come back and you explore the learning. So in the context of the primary sector, is there anything you'd add to maybe different ways of doing that, Hannah, or different ways of approaching that activity?
I think just as you were speaking there, I was thinking about kind of teaching them to connect that feeling with the activity, so that when I feel this way, this is what I do. And that concept of practice, you only get there through practicing that over and over and over again. And that's certainly something that I feel probably works with both levels, but really does work at primary level. And it teaches emotional intelligence and emotional awareness as well, is that when I feel this way, and you can look at it from a physical perspective as well, because obviously as children are developing, they might not have the language to say, oh, I'm anxious, but I have a headache, but I can feel a pain in my tummy, and I know that when I feel that, this is what I can do to help me. And then sometimes you'll find that if that doesn't help, then that probably means they are genuinely actually feeling unwell. But for a lot of times for younger children, that constant somatic complaints of physical ailments tends to be related to anxiety, stress, worry, that they just don't have the language to label.
Yeah. And that's one piece in the section on being calm and relaxed. There is one activity around using the physical body, and again, really spending time making those connections. And we're going to explore loads of different ways that you can do that, but it's extremely important that they learn to connect their physical experience with their emotional response and emotional experience, and then sitting on top of that is they build language to understand that. And that emotional intelligence, and I know I have a lot of work done on that area of emotional intelligence, having the language to describe that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, because sometimes that's the bit that they're actually missing. Mm-hmm. That's the bit that they actually don't know how to verbalise what they're actually feeling, and even just that empathy even with other students as well, and realising what they might be going through. So so that it's the language, like you said, having the label, to be able to speak about how I'm feeling.
And then again, building language. I know there's one activity I would have done with a lot of young people over the years that looks at, there was one page with 20 words on it, and it was around angry and sad words. And actually exploring words that you might think are angry, but actually they're words that are more defining of sad. Mm-hmm. So that sense of, well, I feel down, well, that's an angry word. Well, actually, is it an angry word or is it a sad word? So allowing those kind of nuanced emotions. And even as adults, we find that very, very hard. And we very commonly put everything into that sense of being anxious. And sometimes that anxiety then gets presented and it kind of looks like anger, but it's not anger. It's your emotional response to feeling overwhelmed. That doesn't mean you're angry, it just means you're trying to navigate the world as best you can in that moment. And it's really around understanding for young people, especially neurodivergent young people, that that can be a very normal and a natural response to the situation that they're in. And to help them navigate through that and not be afraid of that or worried of that or try to hide that. Because if you hold it all in, what ends up happening then, you become overwhelmed and it can be more difficult for you to come into school because you're not processing or navigating that emotion. So that's that section really around just exploring that 3-2-1 strategies. We'd love to see you doing that. Again, spending time first looking at it from a global perspective, narrowing it down to individual strategies, then narrowing it down to strategies for that young person. No more than 2. Absolutely no more than 2. Practice the 2 over and over again in loads of different situations as you go through the week or the 2 weeks, and then always reflecting on. It's really important when you encourage a young person to practice a strategy, notice when they're doing it. Because the more you notice when you see them, and there's loads of physical activities like wall pushes or chair lifts, loads of those things, but when you see a young person apply a strategy without telling you that they're applying it, and they're suddenly using that strategy when they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, catch them doing that. Because that's the bit that concretizes that skill for them, and that's the bit where you can say, do you know what, half an hour ago I saw you doing that. I saw you using that skill, that was really, really impressive. You must have been feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but you did A, B and C and I noticed, and well done. That's a really important part of adapting that behavioural swing towards something where the young person is much more in control. So now we're going to move on and we're going to do a little bit of work around food, a little bit of practical work, and then we're going to do a little bit of craft work as well in this section, looking at cross stitch. And again, that'll connect back to it's a great skill for helping you stay calm and relaxed and focused, but it's also you can connect it into the bunting and the other work that we're going to do.